And today we have an artist panel, and we have here Michael Simms, who's this very interesting, beautifully painted lot of work. We've got Martin Tighe, who's in this corner over here, Holly Pearce, who is the shadow man here, and also the colourful ones that are in the front space over there, and Ryan Pola, who's these drawings here and on the front wall. And chairing the panel has a very old friend of mine, but we won't hold that against him.
We've survived.
We have survived. He is a curator, he's an author, he's written numerous essays for us as well as many publications internationally and nationally. He is considered quite an expert on Australian modernism.
Stop, paper word expert, specialist.
Oh, specialist. He's also very finicky. But we're hoping he's going to be able to tease out of these artists some interesting understandings about their work. So I will throw it over to Andrew, but before I do, can I please encourage everyone to please come forward. They're not going to fight. Have a seat, fill up these seats. There's more over there as well, so if you're feeling like it'd be better to sit down, please just grab one. But come in. All right, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's funny, Claire actually popped the certain bubble I was going to use because I was saying, after all, we're talking about undercurrents, and one of the major undercurrents I can feel already is the fear of sitting up front in front of the panel, but touche, you've taken it. Now, with this show, Undercurrents is its title, and we live in a world beset by undercurrents of all sorts. But Claire and Mel's ambition, in their own words, was to curate an exhibition that explored the darkly humming undercurrents of life and the way that we as individuals and as a society respond to such impulses. So to discuss these things, that's why we've been joined by the four artists, Michael, Martin, Holly and Ryan. I've got it right. But in preparation for today's talk, each was actually asked by the gallery to consider the concepts behind their work and what line of inquiry led them to produce the work which they did when responding to this theme. So to start the ball rolling, I'd just simply like to ask, I'm going to ask each artist in order just to give a short account of the undercurrents that are actually in their work. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could just keep these fairly brief answers, because obviously we'll be able to tease things out as we go all the way through. So first of all, I'll start up with Michael. And Michael's this suite here.
Well, I'm very interested in sort of classical techniques, but I've also got a background in psychology and sociology, so kind of trying to bring those two elements together. And I'm particularly fascinated in the way that people react to technology and that kind of compulsion to spend so much time on our devices and the way that changes our perspectives of faces and our interactions with each other. And particularly in the dating and hookup world, and that's something that's kind of, there is like a veil of anonymity there in that world, that it's not something you see, you know, in the everyday environment, but we know that it's kind of simmering beneath the surface. So some of these works are kind of trying to tease out those things that are simmering beneath the surface online.
Well, my body of work started when I was staying in a hotel in Germany, and looking out my window each evening when I'd be having a glass of beer, the lights would come on in the apartments across the laneway, and there was one apartment, two women lived there. They'd get home from work at 6 o'clock and they'd start cooking a meal. So my view was of their kitchen. And I'd turn off the light in my hotel room and just watch these women cook their meal and just go about their domestic chores. It has a level of voyeurism also, certainly, but the most fascinating thing is just watching the ordinariness of life through the aperture of an unveiled window at night. And then as I continued on with the series of works, I find just riding a bicycle around Melbourne, particularly in early winter as the sun is setting earlier and earlier, people don't shut their blinds. I think it's dark at 20 past 5, but often blinds are not shut. So you can just be riding around the streets and see many views like I've painted here that are on display here this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. I must say, actually, to pick up on that, I used to work down the peninsula and I'd drive home every night at exactly that same time. And you'd be amazed what artworks you'd just see as you'd be driving along all the houses at night. Oh, there's an artwork. Oh, there's one. Holly.
Yes. Well, there's sort of two things that are running through my work, and that is the psychological shadow, not the literal shadow. And this is a rich and deep sort of subject matter that I have sort of been practicing for 20 years in a way. And I still sort of don't get it, and I'm still fascinated by it. And connected to that, I've got other works, which is coloured photography works. And they are connected to, it connects into the psychological shadow, but it's more about ritual and shamanism and the multidimensionality of what it is to be a human being. We are still, I'm not a psychologist though, disclaimer, not a psychologist, an artist. So I'm exploring this idea of what it is to be a multidimensional human being in a world, so that our world compresses us into 2D quite a lot of the time. So we're trying to make us as a human, sort of our human experience, a sort of existential, a human experience, shallower, whereas ancient cultures, through ritual, through ecstatic dance, through meditation, for want of a sort of better explanation, sort of try to extend who we are as humans. So what dimensions we could access as humans, and that is what I'm interested in.
Okay, nice and succinct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, bring it home. Bring it home.
So for my work, I generally like to look at ideas of constructing identity, and while that's present in some of my work here today, it's more about an internal dialogue that I wasn't having with myself, and I realised that I needed to have it, so I did, and this artwork's that dialogue.
All right, well, one of the key things, of course, that comes out of this is if we are talking about what are the undercurrents going on through life, and let's be explicit, an undercurrent is in opposition to a current, or a perceived current. A perceived force that somehow seems to be dominant, or if it's not dominant, at least it's the physical one. If you think of a rip of the ocean, which is where, after all, the term comes from, it may appear like this, but underneath there may be something stronger pulling that way. But somehow, whether it's surface tension, whether it's agreement, it maintains a veil of regularity on top whilst everything is turbulent underneath. So with that, particularly with the undercurrents here, a lot of it is to do with psychological and sociological forces. If it's talking about identity, if it's talking about perception, if it's talking about sexuality. But in many ways, I might just come back to Martin, just because in many ways you're the only one who's not dealing with that. You're dealing far more with a snapshot cinema verite, the undercurrents of, okay, world goes on, but oh, there's an undercurrent. But it's also, even though, and I'll just sort of say this for about a minute before asking you to step in, but we live in a world rich, and by rich I mean fulsome, I do not actually mean wealthy, but rich in reality TV, rich in, well, for want of a better term, cam girls and cam boys, all in their little worlds. But yours are not that, because they're not media. They're raw. No one's written a script for this. And so the undercurrents, in a way, of what your projections are on what you're seeing.
Yes, they are. But interesting about reference to a script. When I was painting some of the paintings, I've got an image in my mind of what I want to achieve. And I just go through the process, the physical process of putting the paint from transferring it from one surface to another. until that image is complete. And there's a film directed by Clint Eastwood called The Changeling, and it had particular colours in that film that I really liked. And even though they had a dryness to it, there were daylight scenes. There was something about that film that I wanted to be able to include in these works, so that it has like a cinematic aspect to them. And I rarely see films. I'm not a film buff at all, but certain films really resonate with me. And so as you're spending hours and hours painting the paintings, all these thoughts go through your head, and that's one thought that really remained with me, the cinematic aspect of them.
But do you, in that way, do you see it, someone sitting in front of the bank of screens watching all the different, all of us watching 16 TVs or whatever? Is it something like that? Everyone's a little episodic, because how do you, for instance, choose the exact frame that you think tells this wider, or suggest, because nothing's really telling you, everything's suggesting?
Okay, well, some of these, two of the works that people didn't know I was taking photos of them. One was in a factory in Brunswick. It's like an office building, and I was just riding through there at the time of day that I described earlier. The other one was in Germany, and then the two other ones of my daughter, who I was hoping to be here this afternoon, but she must be elsewhere. So she was in the window. She knew I was taking photographs of her, and so there were many, many images that I could choose from, but there was something that was oblique that I wanted. They're not a portrait of a person, it's just of somebody, just an incidental part of life. I also, on a daily basis, I work as an art teacher at a school, and each morning when I get to school, I go to the music house and I practice piano for half an hour. And the room is upstairs, and I look into the next door neighbour's house, and they're having breakfast. And I'm just practicing, and I've just been watching them have breakfast, and there's some doing my scars, and he irons he's always in a hurry, the bloke's always in a hurry. He irons his shirt, and then he races out the door, and so it's all very, I just find it fascinating.
But just bring it back to the question of what's the undercurrent? Or what do you think? Is this viewing a life that isn't yours, therefore it's my reality versus that? Or is it, here I am playing piano and I'm creating a scale soundtrack to someone ironing? I mean, they're observations, but I wouldn't call them undercurrents.
Yeah, well, I find it hard to really connect it. Well, the undercurrent is the obvious voyeurism that exists in the paintings. Yeah, is that, and I think that's people.
Unnaturally voyeurs.
Indeed.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. So I think that's the connection.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. When we were talking about psychology, it was interesting to say that you'd actually studied psychology. Can I ask what sort of areas you were looking at?
I just did the undergraduate degree, so it was sort of the general overview. But to be honest, so much of it was emphasising statistics and research and understanding the scientific method, but I was able to do sociology, which was really useful to kind of take a step back and actually try and view the motivations for people's behaviour.
Hence the reason that you'd argue this one is probably more sociological rather than psychological.
Yeah.
Okay, of course, now you mentioned social media platforms, and in particular, it's funny because if you're thinking, and this is an honest disclaimer, I've never used a dating app ever, so I'm aware of them, I've looked at them, and I've never used one. But from someone in that capacity, I would say the straight formats, Tinder, would generally be, all about exposing your face, exposing your personality. It's a far more open thing, whereas there is, and I presume this is from gay subculture, from Grindr, these images more than, say, from Tinder. Yeah, well, my understanding being, from what I've spoken with others, is that Grindr is much more about anonymity. It's about anonymous hookups. It's about all these just celebrating and understanding there is that way, but that's in a way an undercurrent there already against the undercurrent of, say, straight dating through Tinder, which is all about one must reveal, one must be honest, there seems to be a lot more fantasy, shall we say, in Grindr. What would you say on those?
Yeah, well, I guess,
Those pulsating undercurrents.
well, a personal perspective, I've sort of just come out of a long-term relationship, so it's all fairly new to me entering that world, and I guess I was sort of somewhat sort of struck by the intensity of that environment online. So there's kind of, some of this work is trying to explore the sort of, it's not to pass any judgment on it, but it's also just my reaction, having like never used them before, just kind of stepping into it and being struck by the intensity of it. But also just because a lot of it uses GPS, and my studio is in a very busy office building, and so there's something
by the photocopy.
there's something very fascinating to me about sort of working in this environment where everyone is conforming to the everyday conventions of wearing business attire, and then being able to just log onto this app and seeing what people are kind of secretly craving. And it seems so incongruous, those two images. But knowing that it's there, it's sort of fascinating. And again, it's not to pass judgment on it, but it's just,
Well,
I'm thinking about it all the time.
It's helping you mediate
Yeah.
by creating these images.
Yeah.
Excuse me. In many ways, the only one who's actually mentioned psychology outright in their artist description is Holly. And she brings in...
Not qualified.
But there is a quote she uses from Jung in that, and if I can quote it, unless you know it verbatim, and you can just stand up and quote Jung for me.
You're asking me?
Why not?
I've got so many.
This one here.
Yes.
The one that's here is the shadow is the invisible saurian tail the man still drags behind him. Carefully amputated, it becomes the healing serpent of the mysteries. Sometimes a tail is just a tail.
No, a tail is never a tail.
But so you're talking about the shadow, and it mentions here the saurian tail, you know, the reptile brain or whatever that other people refer to it. And yeah, by mentioning tail, it can just be a tail. Of course, I've brought in Freud rather than Jung. And therein ends my knowledge of Jung versus Freud, so don't panic. But you'll talk about the shadow. It would seem, and maybe I'm conjecturing, you see the shadow as the undercurrent, do you? As being the yin, the yang, the eros, thanatos, all of those sorts of dichotomies.
Possibly, yes, but I see the undercurrent as consciousness. So in that quote it says carefully amputated, which I think that means for me that, well, so some of my work has the gold in it. So if you can carefully amputate or expose the shadow, expose what is the undercurrent, that is the undercurrent, because they're always there. But it's about what we bring into consciousness and what we bring into the light. So it's about how carefully can we amputate this without sort of the whole Jenga thing falling apart, and what truth are we telling ourselves by not exposing our shadow. So in fact, I've done a lot of reading if anyone's interested on Robert A. Johnson, Jung, some channeled material by Lazarus. And what I find really interesting is that one thing says the ego lies to us and the shadow tells us the truth. So I find that fascinating, and that's sort of partly why there's a lot of reflection in some of my work. There's another great quote here. How do you find a lion that has swallowed you? I'll put my notes away now. Scare everybody.
Sorry, I can't jot down. How do you know if the lion is
How do
swallowed?
you find a lion
I'll
that has
find a
swallowed
lion.
you?
This is, see, I make no pretense of knowing exactly what I'm saying. I just glean and go as we go. That has swallowed you. Thank you. I look forward to the opportunity of using that at dinner one night. So Ryan, listening to all of these sorts of things and consciousness, you have a psychological bent running right through your work too. But one of the intriguing things is I find in a way there's a lot more, apart from, say, Michael's work, sorry, I didn't know Michael. Yes, thank you. We shouldn't sit together, it's too confusing. Apart from Michael's, you're the one where you're a bit more, there's a palpable tension there, shall we say, between what you can see as the undercurrent versus whether it's the flesh pressing against the blackberry thorns or rose thorns, or whether it's the snake in the foliage, whether it's those lovely dandy, dandy longlegs with the most beautifully articulated knees. I do like those things. But those sorts of senses of the undercurrent actually manifesting physically in a way, or in sensation, those are the things I'm picking up. Does any of that ring true, or how would you talk about those in that sense of the undercurrent?
Yeah, I suppose the physical sensation showing up in my work is just a way of me directly taking what I was thinking and feeling and representing that in a way that's tangible to the viewer.
Many years ago, we had a lecturer who worked for David Cronenberg, the film director, and he was saying, and bear with me, this has resonance, he was saying that they were trying to film a scene where they were having an exploding eyeball. And so they got lots of sheep eyeballs and put guns and blow it up, but it just wasn't scary enough, clear liquid eye, just wasn't doing it. Until someone said, why don't you put black liquid in? Now, black liquid is not anatomically correct or biological, but when it blew up, my God, the fear was manifest, you suddenly got it. It's that sense of, as soon as you make fear visible or attempt, if you do it literally, somehow you're never going to achieve it. But if you allude to it, or if you twist it, if you fall prey to, in our darkest mind, we would say, yeah, an eyeball when it explodes, it's black, it's horrible. That's more what makes it more arresting, shall we say. Is that a similar thing to going there? That, you can't necessarily, oh, look, I might be scared to go out, or I might stand myself in a... we have the dream of being naked in front of people. And I am trying to get this to a question.
Yeah.
Bear with me. That's okay. Do you want to move? If it was just a matter of doing an image of a person standing naked in a crowded room, it wouldn't really, you'd almost blatantly get it. This doesn't, this alludes to it, and in many ways it's got more dramatic effect as it probably then allows the brain to think about those undercurrents. So again, is that more what you're alluding to in those subtler ways of depicting?
Yeah, I think, would it be easier to give the answer to what I'm alluding to?
Sure.
So, at the end of last year, I was in Europe and I was teaching there with some friends, and I ended up heartbroken, which it all happens, which is fine. And then coming home from Europe, I realised I just wasn't addressing it. So I was with amazing friends over there and it was great, and I just wasn't answering to myself how to move on. So these works, these four here are situations I was finding myself in and ways that I was treating myself. And I guess kind of just responding to it happening. And then the big one on the wall here is the internal dialogue I was having with myself in overcoming that. So that's what these works are doing. And I think, like you're saying, if I did a literal representation, I could have drawn a self-portrait of me sitting there sad, but...
with the broken heart.
That just would have been sad. But I think these kind of more allude to something everyone goes through, and you can kind of identify with them individually.
And I'd argue that that's what makes them far more successful as resonant artworks rather than the literal. Nothing in this room is literal. And that's a very intriguing thing. So maybe we can talk a bit about undercurrents in art, maybe. Now, if you were to argue 15, 20 years ago, in the Australian art scene, painting was still predominant, very much so. You had various other things coming through, but that was the way. But it was still like a hangover of heroic modernism. so to speak. And particularly since, well, punk is really, for my mind, what shattered all of those and allowed a lot more voices to come through. But in the last 15 years, we've had other breakdowns. Watercolours come back. Who'd have seen that coming? Ceramics, knitting. We haven't quite got to macrame, thank God, but we have. But I haven't we've had textile art here. Sarah Ramos, one of the artists here, who, if you haven't seen Sarah's work, there's a lot of really intriguing undercurrents going with her. But there's this sensibility of the way that materials themselves are provided in undercurrent. And possibly the two straightest practitioners here would be Martin and Michael, just simply through their use of painting. I'd then probably put number 3 with Ryan by using drawing, the most direct contact an artist can have with the material, and then follow it up with someone who's working across a whole range of digital mediums, sculptural mediums, etc. So maybe for you as painters, are there things in that realm about the undercurrent of being a painter in these days and trying to get something across that's valid or can talk across a large community? Maybe I'll start with Martin and then go to Michael.
It's certainly a challenge. So when I visited the Triennial earlier this year, I visited numerous times, and with all the different materials and different media being used to convey people's ideas and imagination, painting really, at times it really struggled, I felt, against a moving image or against it, or a screen the size of this building, or a kinetic sculpture, or a room full of mirrored chairs or stainless steel chairs. A single painting was really quite passive, and so you just have to work harder. So it's a crowded marketplace, but there's an opportunity in that adversity that painters face, that they have to work harder, they have to observe more closely, continue to develop their technique, because painting's always going to exist. It's enjoyed so much patronage over 500 years, and it's got another 500 years and probably another 500 years after that.
Who said painting was dead? Okay, now I deliberately asked Michael because you're a slightly older generation, and also you've done it. Oh, sorry.
You're not
that. And of course, you've also got the teaching background, so you've been imparting all of this knowledge.
Yes.
But for you, someone younger, coming through, yet you've still chosen painting.
Big installations or moving images, and feeling like questioning sometimes, what can a painting convey? When there's so much more sensory stuff that can happen with incorporating technology. But I think everyone, a lot of people still really value it, and it's just something instinctive that I've just followed my instinct with it. And as I said, it's the genre that I work in. And I think just trying to I love portraits and figures, but trying not to just get caught up in doing the same thing over and over, of just capturing something realistic, still trying to breathe some extra life into it somehow. And I guess that's the goal with a painting, is to breathe life into the subject that separates it from just the mundane.
Well, there's still a very strong figurative tradition in Australian art, of which Julian Ashton, from whenever it was, 1892 or something, has been an exemplar in Australian studies. But I once challenged this with one of the main or well-known figurative artists of Melbourne, that once you learn your technique, you've still got to have the idea, you've still got to invest it with something, otherwise it just becomes a static parade of figurative works. So I suppose that's a two-part question. Number one, is it figurative you prefer to work with as a way of getting your ideas across? And secondly, with that in mind, if it is the figure you work with, are you challenged by those sorts of what to actually do with my talent?
What was the first?
Damn you. The first one was, having come out of the figurative thing, I asked the artists, and I said to them, once you've got the talent, what do you do with it?
Yeah, well, I guess because I just love portraits, and it's sort of something that I connect with the subject that I'm painting, and I try to sort of, I get so much satisfaction trying to capture the essence of that person, whether it's the realistic likeness or whether it's just the atmosphere in the painting. But I understand that's not always interesting to other people who don't necessarily know that subject. But I still pursue portraiture as like a stream of what I do. But I think I'm trying to sort of combine that with my perspective on the world, and not just, I understand what you say about sort of it can feel a bit static if you're just doing a realistic portrait over and over, a realistic figure. And I've done that repeatedly to try and improve my skills all the time, but I'm kind of trying to move into this phase where I'm providing some sort of social commentary, and I feel like the figure is really fascinating, particularly to explore it in the context of selfie culture and people kind of obsessed with faces, and we're exposed to so many more faces.
And everyone's smiling.
Yeah, and that sort of ability to craft an identity, I think there's something about what a painting can do that a photograph can't sometimes. So trying to, I don't think I've always achieved it, but I'm kind of pushing myself to, that's the goal, I guess, is to create something that's hopefully a little bit more nuanced and kind of special.
We can choose what to put in and what to leave out, whereas with a photograph, if you're just taking the simple photo, you're getting everything.
You're still believing that the camera never lies?
Yeah.
Oh, purist. Photoshop.